Assalamu alaikum everybody. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad khair al-Mursaleen. In the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate. My name is Idris Elbakri and I'd like to welcome you to another community check-in. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we have had the privilege to be able to connect virtually to make up a little bit for our lack of ability to get together as a community. And today we're going to be discussing the issue of Palestine, something that has galvanized our attention over the past couple of weeks, a topic that is dear to our hearts and something that many of us have been asking, what can we do? What can we do? So today we have a distinguished panel to help us channel our energies and our thoughts into a positive direction, inshallah, God willing. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene people and the homeland of the Métis Nation. Before we delve with our distinguished panel, we are very privileged to have Member of Parliament Leah Gazan for Winnipeg Center from the NDP, Brother Omar Khamisa, the Director of Community Relations for the National Council of Canadian Muslims, and our very own from Winnipeg, Sister Shaheen Sadiq, the matriarch of much of Islamic work in Canada, and from the Islamic Social Services Association. But before we engage with them all, we'd like to start, inshallah, with the blessings of the Quran and the recitation of the Quran that will be offered to us by Nuruddin Elbakri, a grade 12 student. So go ahead, Nuruddin.
تلك آيات الكتاب المبين نتلو عليك من نبأ موسى وفرعون بالحق لقوم يؤمنون إن فرعون علا في الأرض وجعل أهلها شيعا يستضعف طائفة منهم يذبح أبناءهم ويستحيي نساءهم إنه كان من المفسدين ونريد أن نمن على الذين استضعفوا في الأرض ونجعلهم أئمة ونجعلهم الوارثين ونمكن لهم في الأرض ونري فرعون وهامان وجنودهما منهم ما كانوا يحذرون. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Ta-Sin Mim. These are the verses of the clear book. We narrate to you part of the story of Moses and Pharaoh in truth for people who believe. Indeed, Pharaoh elevated himself in the land and divided his people into groups, one of which he persecuted, slaughtering their sons and keeping their women. He was truly one of the corruptors. But it was our will to favor those who were oppressed in the land, making them models as well as successors, and to establish them in the land, and through them show Pharaoh, Haman, and their soldiers the fulfillment of what they feared. Sadaqallah al-Azim.
Thank you very much, Nuruddin. May God bless you with that beautiful recitation, and keep up the hard work and keep studying the Quran, and do well in school too as well, Nuruddin. All right, he's my nephew, so I can say that. So again, welcome back, everybody. So we're ready to get started. So we've had a bit of a change. Brother Omar Farooq, who is the CEO of NCCM, was unable to make it due to a personal emergency, and inshallah everything is going well with him. And so very kindly, Brother Omar Khamisa, also from NCCM, has agreed to move things around to be able to step in. And he does have a hard stop at around 8 o'clock, so we're going to ask him to go first. Again, Omar is the is the manager of community engagement at NCCM, and he has a long history of involvement in the community in the GTA area. And we would like to welcome him to. I'm not sure if he's ever been to Manitoba, but his first virtual visit to Manitoba, and inshallah, we hope to welcome him here physically soon when this is all over with. So Omar, over to you. Tell us about your work at NCCM, the work you guys are doing on the advocating on the issue of Palestine. How the community can get involved, and any advice and suggestions you have for those who want to make a difference.
Jazakallah, brother Idris, and thank you so much for having me here and just inviting NCCM to this really important conversation. This important conversation on an issue that is so near to us and near to our hearts. And honestly, I'm honored to be on this panel with some really amazing folks like yourself, who has been such a staple in the community, with Sister Shaheen, who is just an absolute legend in everything that she has done, with MP Leah as well. Like, everyone here has been, such a testament to our community. And it really is an honor for me to be part of it. And I do want to apologize on behalf of Mustafa for the personal emergency that came up, but we weren't going to leave you guys hanging. That we can't do that to you on a short notice. But honestly, it's been such a pleasure. And you're right. I have not been to Manitoba as of yet, but inshallah, that's the next goal. As we keep expanding and we keep going and moving on and on. But yeah, like as you mentioned, like NCCM, and for those that don't know NCCM and are just hearing about NCCM for the first time, it's the National Council of Canadian Muslims. And what NCCM does, it's an independent, non-profit, non-partisan organization that really protects the human rights, Canadian human rights and civil liberties. So we're out there in the community, challenging discrimination, challenging Islamophobia, building mutual understanding across the board, really, and advocating for the public concern of Canadian Muslims. We're an organization that we have members from coast to coast. We have our head office in Ottawa, Ontario. We have an office in Mississauga in the GTA. We recently just expanded and opened our office on the West Coast in Edmonton, Alberta. And we also have an office in Montreal, Quebec as well. So we're working coast to coast, and inshallah, we can actually get one and come visit Manitoba as well, and work with the community there. I know Sister Shaheen and Brother Idris, you guys have been doing such great work, but in the long term, our goal is to really reduce the attitude of Islamophobia in Canada, right? And for a long time, as NCCM has been, like, our focus has been really just domestic issues, working on making sure Canadian Muslims are protected here at home, right? And when there is an issue abroad, it normally is affected to a Canadian that's abroad, right? And there's many foundational pillars that we do at NCCM, from media relations to legal work to our entire public advocacy team to our education team. And I'm sure the members of the MIA are familiar with our education team. I know Sister Asia has been to Manitoba to do a few workshops. And then we have our community engagement team. But when this incident happened in Gaza, it was a situation that it really just tugs at our heart, right? Like the incident happening in Palestine is something that when we see it, it just absolutely breaks us, right? And all the work that we do domestically, it was something that we're like, what, we need to step into this level now, and we need to be working on issues and advocating towards the local MPPs or MLAs and MPs and to the leaders of the parties, and really advocating for the rights of them to speak out and protect our Muslim brothers, right? Each and every one of us, when we see those images of Al-Aqsa Masjid or the Sheikh Jarrah, all of us get heartbroken. Like, all of us, have to take time to just really look at it and really just, sit with it, because it's not something that we said easily, right? And, no matter what we've been doing domestically, and, this was one step that we wanted to take, right? So, inshallah, our goal now is, for the past few years, we've really mobilized Canada. We've, worked on 75 legal cases, and we've engaged with all politicians and, had workshops delivered coast to coast, but we really wanted to make sure that those steps were taken, right? So when it comes to the Palestine issue, it really says, where we are right now, it comes down to it. And, I'm sure everyone has been watching the news, and everyone has been seeing, what's happened. There was those horrific incidents that were happening around the days of Eid. And then there was a ceasefire that was announced yesterday. And then again today, Masjid al-Aqsa was, attacked during Jummah Salah, right? And, it was, under fire, and there were, rubber bullets, and there were grenades that were going off in Masjid al-Aqsa during Jummah Salah, right? And, we started off with a very incredibly disappointing response from the government, right? Minister Garneau's statement was put out, and, at least he put a statement out, but, it really wasn't enough. Right. We look at the statements that the Minister Garneau has put out. We look at the statements that Leader, O'Toole has put out. We look at the statements that Justin Trudeau has put out. And I don't know about any of you, but I was incredibly disappointed when I looked at it, right? Because we need to be asking for more, right? We need to be asking for more. We need to be making sure that there's more that are coming out, right? The response from the Liberal government, from the Conservative government, have been from the Conservative Party have just been something that we are, needing more, right? The most recent statements did not talk about the human right violations that are at the hand of the Israeli government, right? The Bloc Québécois put forward a motion calling for the end of the Israel colonization and annexation. And that was disappointingly, like that motion was blocked by the Conservatives and the Liberals, right? And then you have the NDP, and I do want, like, as we're sitting on this call, I want to thank MP Leah for, joining 24 other MPs writing a letter to the Prime Minister, right? But the NDP and Jagmeet Singh have been, questioning the relating of the arms deals, right? And even the Green Party has spoken out on the issue, right? It's very clear that Canadians of many backgrounds agree that Canada's response has been insufficient, right? When you see, the Bloc Québécois and the Green Party and the NDP coming together on an issue, when you see Liberal MPs like Salma Zahid speaking out against it, you can see that Canada's response has been insufficient, right? When you see the provincial and the municipal responses, you can see that it has been, insufficient. MP Anna Van Couverden, put out a statement, and you can see it's a different tone than what everyone else in his party is saying, because again, the response has been insufficient, and people are feeling that, right? And that was the letter that, like I said, MP Leah put together a letter with 24 other MPs towards the Prime Minister, because it's been insufficient, right? The statements that have been said by the government, have not acknowledged the following, such huge human right violations, right? Human rights violations that, all norms and basic human dignity has been broken. Attacks on journalists, bombing of humanitarian facilities like the Red Crescent, the killing of physicians, including those leading the fight against COVID in Palestine, the blockade against the humanitarian aid into Palestine, the air raiding bombing of civilian targets, attacking worshippers on Al-Aqsa, attacking after a ceasefire at one of the third holiest site for Muslims across the globe, right? And this is in addition to the ongoing systemic issues that are associated with the siege of Gaza, right? The occupation and the expansion of the Israeli settlements. Israeli security forces have been attacking people, in the last days of Ramadan through Eid, in the place when they're praying, right? This is an issue where it's been problematic to people, to Muslims around the world, including over 1 million, Muslims in Canada have voiced their hurt from it, right? We started a petition that was released, in the first days of this, and 100,000 Canadian Muslims signed this petition. You don't get 100,000 Canadian Muslims signing anything nowadays. We have 1 million Muslims. When 10% of Muslims in Canada say, no, we need to have this kind of, something coming out from the government, it shows how much it's hurting us, right? Like I always, tell people, like, we get a lot of community engagement with stuff that we do domestically, but we never have 100,000 people, 100,000 Muslims saying, no, enough is enough. We need this to stop. We need our people to not have to be scared when they hear a loud noise going over their houses, or when they hear a loud noise around their homes. And our brothers and sisters in Palestine cannot have that, right? So what we need to do is we need to continue to urge the Canadian government to acknowledge the realities of what's happening, right? Canada must stand for the human rights of the Palestinian people, right? And against the human rights violations of the Israeli forces, right? And, as NCCM is moving on and as NCCM is going, we're doing it in a few ways, right? We have these open letters that are sent across the country, right? We have this open letter that is a national letter, and the link is on the screen at nccm.ca/letters for Palestine. And these are letters going directly towards Prime Minister Trudeau, right? Going directly towards Aaron O'Toole, going directly towards Jagmeet Singh, and then the leader of the Bloc, the leader of the Green, the leader of the NDP, the Conservatives, and the Prime Minister, saying that we need more, right? No matter what has happened, all the great responses have been happening, we need more, and we're not going to stop until we make sure that we're getting that more for our community, right? We have our phone banks, and anyone that's watching this and wants to join our phone banks, we're calling local MPs and MPPs in our area, right? We've been doing these phone banks, and right now we've had 500 people join our phone banks calling their local MPs and MPPs. We've had over 4,000 phone calls to local MPs around Ontario and Alberta and in British Columbia. And if anyone is interested in joining our phone bank, send me an email. Send me an email to omar@nccm.ca, and just put phone bank in your subject, and we'll be added to the phone banks, right? We have to continue to be, have this political engagement at all sides of parties. Encourage to do more. Suggest that not enough has been done. Grow out our letter writing campaigns. Grow out our phone bank. The ask is simple: for a humanitarian response to ending violence, and a humanitarian response to end the cruelty that is happening. Right? We have to be out there supporting journalists who are writing about what's happening, because these journalists are facing the hatred in every single side that they're going on. Right? There was a great article that was put in the Toronto Star by a sister, Shazia Kermali. Shazia, I could be messing up the name, but Kermali. And when that went out, she got so much hatred online. Right? There's been news reports that have been done, right, on any of the news reports, and there's been so much hatred that they get when they talk about it. We have to show support to those journalists, and we have to put that pressure on the media as well to be talking about both sides. We need to work on our education. One of the things before I came on here, and Brother Idris was talking about it before we went live, was the education system. So we just actually started something in Ontario where we're actually emailing all the major school boards as well as Minister Stephen Liche, asking for educational reform on this issue, because it needs to be done. There are students in school that have parents and that have cousins and family that are over in Gaza, that are over in Palestine, that have this kind of traumatic issue, that when somebody talks about it in a chat room, that it's not okay. When someone brings it up to them, it's not okay. The education system needs to be reformed for it. So we need to continue to put pressure on them and take it to the next level. And long term with NCCM, our goal is now to really focus on bringing folks in and bringing employees in to be able to do this foreign policy work. This foreign policy work to make sure issues like this doesn't happen anymore. And we make sure that we can put that pressure on the government to stand up for human rights violations like this. Right? It's been a disappointing response. And what we need to do together is work together, no matter where we are. As we're young, we're old, all of our hearts ache when we see the work in Palestine, when we see the traumatic incidents in Palestine, when we see the buildings falling down in Palestine, when we see Al-Aqsa Masjid, when we see the Dome of the Rock have soldiers in front of it, our heart breaks, our hearts cry, and we can do something about it here. We can put that pressure on them. We can get those statements. And again, I want to thank MP Leah for actually joining 24 other MPs and actually joining and sending a letter to the Prime Minister, because it means a lot. It means a lot that we're actually getting this work out there, that we're actually doing this work. And I want to thank, the MIA for putting on top conversations like this, because these conversations are essential to know what we can do, to know that there are options for us. It's not just about, sharing on social media the stuff that's happening at Al-Aqsa. We can do something here. We can do something to make sure that the human rights violations and the humanitarian response to end violence can happen when we speak out against it. When people like Leader Jagmeet Singh ask about the Israeli arm deals, we can do something by thanking him for that, by thanking MP Leah, by thanking MP Salma Zahid, by thanking those that support us, and saying to everyone, we need more, we can do more, and we can make sure that our brothers and sisters do not have to go through that anymore. That's kind of my entire spiel. I hope I kind of covered everything for Brother Idris. But Brother Idris, if there's anything else that you think I should be mentioning here, please jump in. But yes, please go to to the link that was on your site, nccm.ca/letter for Palestine, and send a letter to all the leaders. If there's anything that you have in mind, anyone listening that you want to do, that you feel like, you want to put, do a phone bank for your local MPs, email me. I'll organize the entire thing. I'll give you scripts. I'll give you the numbers for everyone. We'll send letters to them. We'll make sure it does work, right? Because we only can do this when we're all together. I always have this, this saying in my head that I go around when we're talking about our community engagement work, and it talks about how, and it's about Muslims being of one heart. Right? A lot of the time, we're so fractured internally. We have these fractures between our nationalities and our sectarial divide and our gender divide and our beliefs divide. But there's always these incidents that come together that we all go together. And this is one of those incidents that we all join our arm in arm, right? Where all the Muslims at 1.5 million of us come together and say, no, we're not going to take that. And when we do that, the stuff that we don't even imagine can actually take place. And that's exactly an opportunity that we have when it comes to the people of Palestine and the people of Gaza. But yeah, thank you so much for my time. I have a couple minutes. I know Brother Idris wants to ask some questions, so I can, stay for a couple minutes, inshallah, if there are questions. But if not, I really just want to thank the MIA and Brother Idris for putting this all together and, inviting us to come tonight.
Oh, thank you for your comments, Omar, and appreciate you being, willing to be flexible with your schedule to join at the last minute. So you did mention a couple of action items. One was to go and sign that letter, and the link is shown right here on the screen. The second is that you've got phone banks. So basically, people can you can work with volunteers to set up a phone bank to call government leaders.
You'll call your local MPs,
local MPs,
or your local MPPs, or like if, for example, like MP Leah has been fantastic, we would call her to say thank you, right? But then there's MPs that haven't said anything. We would call them to be like, hey, we need to hear something from you, right? So we have these different phone banks. Like, for example, Salma Zahid got phone calls to say thank you, and then there were MPs that didn't say anything. They were like, hey, we need you guys to say something right now, like, and we send like 2,000 phone calls to that. People be like, hey, we need some action on here.
So let me ask you this question. So now that there is a truce in place or a ceasefire, how important is it to continue this momentum and not just kind of react emotionally when the thing is happening and then so can you comment on that?
Of course, yeah. Like it is so essential because it's very easy to talk about an incident when it happens when it's happening, and we see like buildings falling down and people being killed, but at the end of the day, this has been happening in Palestine for years and decades, right? And this is the real life issues that are happening to these people, right? And let's just look at today. The ceasefire happened yesterday, and the Masjid al-Aqsa was attacked today, right? This is some stuff that cannot happen, right? The ceasefire doesn't mean that the Sheikh Jarrah, the people that live in Sheikh Jarrah are not losing their homes, right? The ceasefire does not mean that Masjid al-Aqsa cannot be brought in with armed forces. It means that there'll be no more that nobody's firing at each other anymore, right? But the brothers and sisters living in Sheikh Jarrah are still losing their homes. The humanitarian crisis that's still happening has still been happening for years, right? The annexation of the people of Palestine is still happening time after time after time, right? And we need to make sure that these statements can happen, that we can talk to the government about making sure arms deals don't happen, like that leader Jagmeet asked about, that we can make sure that there's humanitarian resources going to Palestine, that there's aid going to Palestine, that the people of Palestine whose homes were destroyed in every kind of capacity can be looked after.
Thank you. And just another follow-up before you go is, so you're expanding into basically into advocating for this cause. You're moving away. You're not restricting yourself now to just domestic issues. How does that impact your organization, and what can we do to help?
Yeah, so for 20 years, and Sister Shaheen can say she's been supporting with NCCM for a very long time as like a trusted board member. But for a very long time, we've only done domestic. So our whole organization is built to have domestic work. This is our first time we're doing international work, and Ya Allah, it's a juggernaut. We did not. We're not surprised, but we definitely don't have enough people on board to be doing it. So much so that for the next little while we'll only be doing the Palestine issue because we know how much work it actually is going to be. So we are hiring right now people to come on to actually be doing the international work. And in that kind of case, like if you are interested in supporting NCCM and the work that we're doing, please go to nccm.ca/donate and whatever you can to donate to NCCM as we look to expand to an entire department, right? Like our team at NCCM, we do all this domestic work, and for us to do the international work, we would need almost a second team, to be honest with you, because you guys know how it is. And to be honest with you, once we do one, how many other international affairs issues are there, right? Like at the same time Palestine is happening, I promise you there's 4 other issues just like Palestine in places that are not getting as much news or don't feel like Palestine because we see it. So we need to make sure that we have that arm. So any kind of donations, any kind of help that we can do to grow the organization, to look after that while not losing any of the domestic work, because that's one thing we don't want to do. We don't want to expand to that. And then, a Muslim here in Canada feels Islamophobia or their hijab gets ripped off. And then we lose something, and then they feel like we're not looking after them. We can't do that. We'll never lose the fact that we're doing that domestic work as well.
Right. So the link is right there on the screen. Anyone who wants to support NCCM in expanding their work, I think should definitely do so. We, as Canadian Muslims, we do deserve, an efficient, effective national organization that looks after our issues and our needs and our rights here at home, but also human rights globally. So, and Omar, you have to go. So thank you so much for joining
I can
us. And
question, brother Idris, if you want. If you have another question on there, if not, then then I'll jump off. But if you had another question, I can
I
do one
think,
more.
thank you. I think we're good. So thank you so
Okay,
much,
perfect.
Omar. Appreciate it. And again, we'll continue repeating what you've shared with us about taking action and supporting NCCM over the course of the evening tonight. So thank
Perfect.
you, and have a
Thank you
good
so
night.
much. Thank you,
Okay.
MP Leah. Thank you, Shahina. You guys have been absolutely amazing. Thank you guys so much. And masalam to everyone that's watching from home.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. All right. So that was I think quite enlightening from NCCM to know that they are expanding their work into the international issues and focusing on Palestine. And inshallah, we can all help support that. And I think it's they're professionals. I think that's one of the things that people we need to appreciate is that we need professionals focused on these issues. It can't just be done ad hoc or haphazard. So we should they're definitely worthy of our support. So I'd like to start the discussion with the Honorable Leah Gazan, Member of Parliament for Winnipeg Centre, and Leah before, I guess, before politics, was an educator, and she's been working for human rights at the various levels for many years. I had the privilege of joining a session that Leah helped organize for faith leaders across Canada with the Palestinian ambassador to Canada. And so I'd like to invite Leah to tell us more about that and to tell us more about what she's done as a parliamentarian on this issue, and why does she do it? Why does she courageously stand up and speak for Palestinian rights?
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I can't even express what an honor it is to be invited into your community to share a little bit about the work that I've been doing, but also the work that our party's been doing. I just want to take a step back before I talk about what I've been doing. I've been pushing this issue prior to the recent violence and that's been occurring. And to talk about movement building, one of the reasons why I'm privileged to sound my voice even louder at this moment actually has to do with NDP members and the fact that uh, during the last NDP convention that happened this past April, members lobbied very hard to push forward a resolution. And I want to read the resolution. It says, working with partners for peace in Israel and Palestine, respecting UN resolutions and international law, supporting peaceful coexistence in a viable, independent states with agreed upon borders, an end to Israel occupation of Palestinian land, and an end to violence targeting civilians. To that end, ending all trade and economic cooperation with illegal settlements in Israel, Palestine. And two, suspending the bilateral trade of all arms and related materials with the State of Israel until Palestinian rights are upheld. I know that you spoke in the beginning about actions. And I think actions begin with people and movements. And certainly we saw that at the last NDP convention, where that resolution actually passed with the support of 80% of NDP members. That is amazing. That has provided a platform for our leader, Jagmeet Singh, of course, to pose his question during question period, pressuring the Liberal government to stop arms trade. We have, my good colleague, Jack Harris, who's the international affairs critic, who's now pushing for an emergency debate when we return to the House of Commons. A lot of it in response to the massive outpouring from the community in support of Palestinian human rights. Our mailboxes are full with letters coming from across Canada. It is powerful. In fact, on some evenings, My email box has been moving so quickly. I can't even click on my devices to get into other areas because the letters of support for Palestinian human rights, for this government to take action, is overwhelming. Um, my good brother and seatmate, Matthew Green, who has been a champion around Palestinian rights, in the last week of Parliament last week made a statement, used his time to read a statement on behalf of a Palestinian woman and her feelings and position around what was currently taking place. Nikki Ashton, another very strong advocate for Palestinian human rights, arranged a large gathering with former Labour leader, UK Labour leader Corbyn a couple of months ago. Ottawa Centre NDP did a phone bank that I participated in a couple of weeks ago. Those are a few of the things that members of our caucus have certainly pushed for, and certainly folks like Don Davies, myself, and Matthew Green, part of the Palestinian Friendship Group at the House of Commons, working together to draft a letter to the Prime Minister to take a greater action, because we do need to keep the pressure up. I've had the privilege to get to know the Palestinian ambassador over the past little while, meeting, talking about human rights matters, actions that need to be taken. You have a very powerful ambassador in Canada, in Hala Abu Hasiria, who is strong, articulate, powerful in her words, through tremendous kindness. I do believe that her presence in Canada will make a difference to be able to push these issues forward. Most recently, in terms of my own involvement, I've been posting on social media for quite a while, even before the events that have been occurring the past couple of weeks. I did get some pushback a couple of months ago, calling out the human rights abuses that are occurring on illegally occupied territories. And, sometimes people are scared to use their voice. But here's the thing. As members of Parliament, we take an oath of office. And part of our oath of office is to uphold the rule of law. And that is our Constitution, which includes domestic and international legal obligations and agreements we have signed on to. When I heard the minister the other day in his response to Palestine, basically saying we are going to push aside the Geneva Convention. When we talk about having a two-state solution, but not talking about the inequalities on both sides between the oppressed and the oppressor, as the ambassador speaks so well to, if we don't use words like the system that's in place, as you all know, an apartheid system, if we keep selling arms to a military regime where we see the genocide of peoples, we are not fulfilling our legal obligations as members of Parliament. So I don't think I'm really that courageous. I think I'm just doing the job that I've been elected to do, and that is to uphold the human rights of all peoples. And so I've been vocal about it. And as I have always in my life, about human rights matters. The most recent thing I organized, of course, was an interfaith gathering with the ambassador, after meeting with her and some of the work that I've done around Indigenous rights in Canada, I had asked her, I said, have you met with leaders of the faith community in Canada? And she hadn't yet. I said, we have to do that. I said, the faith community in Canada is unbelievable in terms of organizing, in terms of lifting up issues. And I think part of a way forward is to lift up voices on the ground with voices on the inside and have that seamless communication. That's something that I've always stayed true to, certainly in my leadership style. And I know that many members that are organizing on the ground, particularly around Palestinian human rights, are doing, and to name it, to be able to name it. I don't think the pushback, I don't feel like I've gotten really bad pushback. Maybe, as a longtime Indigenous rights advocate, I have a pretty thick skin about these things over time. But it's just the right thing to do, because when we see the human rights violated of one person, any peoples, who's next? So we must always speak up for everybody's human rights. I know I will continue to do that. I know our caucus will continue to do that. I'm hoping that we will get the emergency debate when we get back to the House of Commons. And I think we need to take some drastic measures to stop the vile human rights violations that are occurring right now, including looking at putting in place sanctions. If this violence continues. So I know that I'm glad that we were able to send a letter to the Prime Minister, but we have a lot of work to do in this country. We have failed, I believe, as a country on this issue in a very massive way, and we need to do better. And so I'm here not to give direction, but to listen to your direction in terms of what you need me to do as an elected member going forward to be helpful. But I can tell you the letters are working. Certainly watching people gather in solidarity for peace and justice, it is working. And I will be a good ally in this fight for justice as a fellow Indigenous person on the other side of the globe, to uphold Indigenous human rights, the kinds of Indigenous rights that are articulated in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples.
Thank you very much, Leah, for those powerful words. There is actually a steady stream of comments and questions coming in, but I think I'm going to hold them until the end, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
I think it'll be, because then we can all kind of join in responding to those comments and those questions. But really, thank you so much for your position and for your powerful words, and for your I'll say it, bravery and courage. It's not easy. I mean, I, as a Palestinian, sometimes find myself, doubting whether I should speak out. To be honest, although I have firsthand experience with the situation, just because sometimes it feels like a very hostile environment to be speaking up in. So I'd like to move to Shaheen Sadiq, who needs no introduction. I think I'll just say that she's a matriarch of Islamic work in Canada and the US, and obviously one of our own here in Winnipeg, and has for many years led the Islamic Social Services Association as well as Islamic History Canada and many other initiatives. A powerful voice in our community. I think a voice that offers healing and comfort oftentimes, but also can be, when necessary, can be strong and unequivocal in her positions. So Shaheena, over to you.
Thank you, Idris. First, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, everyone. We are, as a community and as humanity, going through a difficult time, a testing time. And I'm reminded from the Quran, where Allah says, do you think you will say you believe and you will not be tested? And so we are going through a test. And we have to remember, because a lot of us are also struggling with emotional trauma, with psychological trauma. And one way to address trauma usually that works is to connect. Connect with people who are your allies, your friends, who share the same vision and the same values of justice and human rights and so forth. So, for parents who have young children, for example, who perhaps are hearing things that are hurting them, they're looking at images, my response always is, please do not oversaturate your kids with news that is not the happy news. Talk to them about positive stuff, positive things like Leah is doing, like interfaith community is doing. Um, and I can tell you the support that we get far outweighs the negative, the pressures, the threats, these, and the kids should listen more to the positive aspects of it. When it comes to the Palestinian issue, I have been, I think, working on it for more than 30 years. Was one of the first people who started writing and being published here in Free Press and other papers about this issue. We never had a voice out there that spoke from a Palestinian perspective. And now there are so many. Before we didn't have the internet, we didn't have social media. So those of us, my age group activists, really had to work hard to get the word out. It all was physical exertion as well. Now the young people have the privilege, know the social media, and that is why news is getting out so fast. So look at the strengths of this medium, use it for the positive, and get mobilized to bring this interfaith gathering that we are having on Monday. Was one of the leaders wrote back to me and said, you have the spiritual audacity to organize something like this. And I thought for a moment and I said, is this a negative or a positive? But we definitely was positive. But when we say we are people of faith, because, and as Leah said, the interfaith community in Canada and especially Manitoba is very strong. Manitoba is the hub for social justice movements, whether it was the unions or others. And so we have a history of it. And we have still people living who have the memory of how to do it. So it's important that we connect. But sometimes the voices that are divisive or that want to separate us into our silos are the ones that need to be set aside. I have, CBC was doing an interview with me and I said, first thing I want you all to know is that this is not a Jewish and Muslim issue. This is a human issue. It's between Palestinians and Israelis. Because some will push it to be a religious issue. It is not. Palestinians are also Christians. So that's one thing, is to know the context and the language. I have written as a grandmother an open letter. I got a response back from one of the newspapers saying, well, we really cannot publish it because you've used the word apartheid and we don't want to make people feel bad about this. And I'm just thinking, really, this is where we are at. This is the self-censoring of the media. We are saying we have not heard from our political leaders, and yes, we have not. And we are working through NCCM and other organizations to bring that forward. But we have to also pay attention that the majority of people get their information through the media. That is how their perceptions and their opinions are formed. And if we have a media that is silent, and I'm talking about mainstream media, of course we have a lot of online, is that majority of Canadians will remain uninformed or ill-informed about what is going on. When I was young and we didn't have social media, we used to do teach-ins at universities and schools and community centers talking about this issue, the history of, going back to Balfour Declaration. And it is important for those who are working in this field and are speaking up to know the history. We need to move forward, but we need to know the history and how you phrase your argument, your discussion is very extremely important. But one thing I will caution, please be sincere. If you hold any kind of bias or any kind of a racist view in your heart, but you're trying to give an impression that you are all, include everyone, and it's not going to work. So as Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, told us that when you see an injustice, stop it, if you have the power to stop it. If not, then speak up against it. And for a weakest form of faith, he said, is at least consider it wrong in your heart. So when we speak to people, speak to them at those three levels and see where they are at and see where they can contribute and work with you. It is also very important for us to know that Islamophobes, right-wingers, and other evangelical right-wing groups have formed a coalition that is going to test our patience. They will come if we have a rally, they will come if we have a program like this, they may try to, what you guys call bomb it or whatever, and or send negative messages, threatening messages to you and to your organizations. Know that they are ganging up, as they say. But that should not be a thing for you to take a step back, because truth stands clearly from falsehood. If you have truth on your side, you have sincerity on your side, if you really care for humanity, regardless of race, religion, ethnicity, orientation, and whatnot, your voice will be heard. Your voice will be respected. Your voice will make a difference. I often say to students that I speak to, and this question always comes up, whether I'm speaking to schools or universities, and over the years I've done maybe thousands and thousands of presentations, this issue always comes up about Palestinian issue. What is it about? Because all they know is there's terrorism and then there are victims. And terrorism, of course, always is associated with our community. And what I will do is first lay out for them what is going on, what is happening, and then ask themselves, would you like to live like that? And I'll tell you an example. A Palestinian group of professors had come to on the invitation of the Mennonite University to Winnipeg. And I hosted some of them. And one of the professors had brought their son. Muhammad was 13 or 14 at that time. And I told him, let me take you to Assiniboine Park. Let me show you Winnipeg. And we wanted to, and he said, no, just tell me where to go and I'll walk. And as a mother, I was always, he's such a young kid. How can you walk all this distance? And one day I asked Muhammad, I said, Muhammad, why are you walking everywhere? If you don't want to go with me, well, we can get a taxi or we can get friends to take you. And he said, no, I have never walked where I didn't have to go through a checkpoint. And I can tell you as a grandmother and as a mother, that hit me right here. A 14-year-old boy has never walked freely in his life. That's the kind of reality that our children in Palestine are living through. And year after year, these are now 4 or 5 generations. And to not have that empathy and not see that empathy in our political leaders is a challenge which we need too. And I think language is the most important thing about it. How do we frame how this conflict has been framed in the media, and how we are always responding rather than promoting our own narrative, rather based on facts and truth and history. Um, and so I think that's our challenge, is to educate uh, the Canadian population about the facts and truths about it, not be afraid to challenge status quo, because as taxpayers, as citizens of this country, please remember, democracy is only as good as how engaged the citizens are. Otherwise, it's tyranny of the majority. So these are some of the thoughts I want to share with you. And if there are questions, Idris, you can go ahead and ask, but I will leave at that. You're muted.
I am muted there. Okay, thank you very much, Sister Shahina. And you mentioned that boy you wanted to walk, and I do have a similar experience. My father visited Winnipeg, many years ago when I first moved here, and we took a road trip and out west, and he just insisted on driving and driving. He was exhausting himself driving, and I said, take a break, I'll drive. Said, no, I can't believe I'm just driving such an open country without having stopped all the time. So I think he pulled it, all the way from Vancouver to Winnipeg because he just enjoyed driving and without having to stop at a checkpoint. And that's the reality of people in Palestine. It's obviously much more traumatizing when you go through that as a child. So there's lots of comments, and we'll start questions, and we'll start taking them one at a time. I'll start with one that I have here in front of me. In terms of advice on just on organizing, on getting organized, on getting active. A lot of young people, and this just goes both to you, Leah, and to Shahina. A lot of young people feel frustrated, and oftentimes the one thing they want to do is they want to have a rally. But I think others are asking, how can we get organized? What should we do to get organized long term? Do you have any thoughts on that? I'll start with you, Leah.
I think just to acknowledge that feeling of feeling frustrated, I think, people certainly have a right to feel frustrated, when, you see things going on and it's not getting the response that it deserves. So I just want to honor that. In saying that, I think Auntie Shahina, if I can call you Auntie Shahina,
Absolutely.
I want to be part of the Auntie Shahina club. Everybody calls you.
The fan club, yeah.
One of the things that we did, certainly around Indigenous rights in the country, are teach-ins, face-to-face teach-ins. I think there is growing Islamophobia. I have to listen to it all the time. In the House of Commons, it is vile, it is racist, it is dangerous. And I think you combat that through education, by telling a different story. I agree. I think the media does not provide all the facts, particularly around this matter. And so, building knowledge around this issue, I think, is really critical. And I'm quite serious. I mean, that email campaign, like since I've been in this forum, I've gotten 20 emails on Palestine. It has taken over my mailbox, and I think those kinds of techniques certainly work. Letter writing campaigns. I know for Bill C-262, to see the full adoption and implementation of UNDRIP, we actually published poetry, published a magazine, published a book. We walked 600 kilometers between Kitchener and Ottawa Faith leaders. I worked with faith leaders to push that issue, and along the way we had teach-ins every night. We walked 30 to 40 kilometers a night. So I think there's all sorts of creative ways, and it doesn't necessarily mean always talking. It can be done through art. It can be done through music. It can be done through storytelling. There's so many vehicles. But to remember that change is slow and gradual. I mean, I think the most archaic place in the world is actually the House of Commons. It's the most colonial environment in the whole country. That's where they wrote the Indian Act. This is where they continue to support acts of violent colonialism, something that and neocolonialism, that's something that's occurring in Palestine right at this moment. So those are just some of the things that I've certainly participated in terms of creating awareness and not being afraid to have to stand alone. You know, sometimes when you speak up, it means that you have to stand alone. And, you know, sometimes it's good to stand alone because it gives you time to reflect and really reflect on why you are doing it. And so and to also, as a last thing, if you are going to take an action, know the consequences of that action and always ask yourself, can I live with those consequences? And if you can live with those consequences, you know, then it's probably an okay action because it comes from a good place.
So very true. Thank you so much, Sister Shahina.
I would say work with collaboration, build relationships. This is something that I learned from my father and my grandmother, who always encouraged making diverse relationships, not just stay in your silo. And your mind expands. My greatest supporters in my work have been people outside the Muslim community. Carl Red, Leah, you remember him, his work, it was excellent. Or Howard, our friends in other communities, to talk to them, to build relationships, to care, because when you build relationships, people care and they're there for you. We can't just expect to send out an email or a Twitter or whatever you young people do and expect people will come running. They need to know you. And how do they know you is by you stepping out of your comfort zone, having friendships and relationships. What I have found most empowering is the relationship I have developed with the Indigenous community. Our experiences are so similar. What's happening in Palestine, for example, are colonial policies. And if we can show Canadians that what was done to our Indigenous people is being done to the Palestinians, that's a way of having a collaborative relationship. We need to also stand up for others. Just don't expect everybody to stand with us or for when we ask them. If you can't stand with others, if you can't, don't be the voice for them, because this is a mistake that we sometimes do. It's a colonial thing. I will be your voice. No, every community should have their own voice, but we can stand with them to have the wisdom and the patience that I am here for you, but I will not speak for you. I will speak with you. I will be your anchor. And then you get the same respect back. I have to just, alhamdulillah, praise be to Allah, organize anything. It just takes minutes for people to respond, because over the years we have stood with them, right? So we have a grant, for example, for the young people who are listening, who want to learn how to do it and what to do. We are doing a training, a national training for a national strategy against Islamophobia. And I will be training. There are about 30 people coming from across Canada. We still have some seats for locals. It's free. And we are bringing in experts across the country, but we are mostly, the model is what Islamic Social Services has been doing for the last 20 plus years. on reaching out to people and communities, how to do media engagement. We will have Monia Mazik talk about, the how she advocated for her husband Arar. We'll have other people to come and train, because without proper training and professionalism, you can't really do this kind of work. You have to really learn from those who have done it and are still doing it from every community. Leah, when we were at the meeting, a thing that came up, which I made, and for the young people who are too young to remember, Nelson Mandela was considered a terrorist, right? In Canada. Who were the people who worked, not the politicians, to work towards the end of apartheid? It was the interfaith communities. It was the social justice communities. And so my advice was, let's follow that map, right? Because we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We know what worked. So for the young people, that is the reason you need to learn from what has gone before, and of course charter your new path, because my generation doesn't know about social media and I'm not very effective on it. But if you combine the two, we can be a force for justice and human rights, and we are. Right? Allah says in the Quran, stand up for justice, even if it is against yourself, your kid, your kin, the rich or the poor. And that is one thing which is challenging. Standing up for justice for ourselves and our kith and kin is very easy. But standing up for justice, even if it is against them, that's the challenge. That tests your merit, your character, as the character of our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who said, even if my daughter stole something, I would punish her. Right? There is no two justices. There's one justice, one truth. And that's the attitude that you have to have.
Thank you both for responding to that. There's a question addressed at Leah from Mohammed Nijam. He says, thank you for expressing solidarity with Palestine. What are some barriers and difficulties that you face when advocating the rights of Palestinians within the Canadian Parliament?
It's so funny. Like, I get asked that question. I've been a long time human rights advocate, and I think over the years I've kind of developed a thick skin. I know earlier on this year when I expressed solidarity on Twitter, it ended up in the news. Like, my name ended up in the news. It was a little harsh, but I don't really focus on that. Maybe that's naive. I just focus on, like, I believe in human rights. And, Auntie Shaheen brought up Nelson Mandela. I focus on that. And, I'm, as I indicated before, I don't just do things flippantly. I know what I'm doing when I do it. And I always ask myself, am I willing to live with the consequence of my choice? And I am. So I feel okay. And what I wouldn't feel okay about is staying silent in the face of human rights. That would be painful, to stay silent and not do to go against my values, values I learned very, very clearly from my parents, who I had a tremendous respect for. So I think that's more of the focus. And I feel excited about the shift in the conversation. I felt really excited that members of the NDP passed that resolution by 80%. I felt very proud to be part of a party that supported human rights. And I think that's my focus. Barriers, I think we make things difficult. I don't think there really is a barrier. It's about political will and choice. And I'm choosing to stand up for human rights.
Thank you. And I'll say this, that as a Palestinian living in Canada for a decade and a half now, that this one recent conflict is the time I felt least lonely. because I've just felt it was palpable that there's a shift in public position and in people wanting to express solidarity and in sympathy, and I personally do appreciate that. Eve is asking, is there a piece of advice you have for young individuals on overcoming the fear of retaliation when it comes to speaking against Israel? I think you've both touched on that somehow, but I think it'd be good to address that. Shahina, you want to take that one?
Yeah, first I would say I don't speak against, I speak for. That's something that you have to understand, because when you speak for something, the other is obvious, right? So if I'm speaking for human rights, justice, and peace for Palestinians, it's obvious that they don't have it, right? I don't have to go on the attack. But at the same time, I always recognize that if wrong has been done to Israelis, or if Israelis are suffering, that we also recognize that, right? We also acknowledge it. Sometimes we don't have, we get very linear in our, or tunnel visioned in our, because we are angry, we are hurt, right? That's the worst time to speak up. When you're angry and you are feeling the pain, take a little time to process your emotions. If you're going to speak out, and find friends with whom you can. I have a whole large group of friends who are my sounding board, right? Who will tell me, Shahina, calm down. Let's walk through this. So that is why I was saying collaboration and so forth. So please always speak the positive, and that in itself will highlight what you want to highlight, because otherwise you're not heard. Once you go on the attack, uh, it's human nature to just pull back, right? So that would be my advice to you. And Leah, to you.
Leah, have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's such good advice. And and sometimes I don't respond.
Yeah.
Because I don't feel that I don't feel it's always necessary to defend things that or to argue things that aren't based in fact. So sometimes I don't respond unless I feel it's constructive, unless I feel like it's going to advance where I want this discussion to go. I don't involve myself in that discussion. And I think you're absolutely right about advocating for something, not against, but advocating for something is very powerful. Yeah, very powerful.
Thank you both. I wanted to just elaborate a bit on the theme of relationships. So Shahina, you've been a bridge builder, I think, for all of your life here in Canada. Leah, obviously, as someone who's been working and advocating, you have to build relationships and alliances. So our community, uh, especially here in Manitoba, I think maybe out in the GTA, the community is better established. Our community here, I think, is still relatively recent comers to Canada. Advice on how to forge, even at the individual level, in terms of building bridges and establishing connections and creating those relationships with our fellow Canadians.
If you want me to go first.
Yes, please go ahead. Go ahead.
I think Idris, for young people, I want them to remember that I was not always this old. So when I came to Canada, I was also young. I was not even, and so I had to work hard with a young mother, with family. But I realized that it was my responsibility, right? Because people didn't know anything about Islam when I first came in '76 to Canada. And I remember being asked, and this is a little fun stuff. I was asked by one of my neighbors in the apartment block, how many camels did my dad exchanged me for? Okay. And of course, I was young and I was flabbergasted. And my father was living in the same apartment block on the second floor. So I walked down, all ready to have a battle. And I said, Dad, so how many camels? And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, well, I would have preferred a Cadillac. So that put me in my place, but I realized all they knew was what they saw in Hollywood, right? Or what they read in Orientalist. And so education is the key. First yourself, and then others, but in a very soft way. Sometimes, as Leah was saying, we get argumentative, and I always remind myself that the Quran says that when you are faced with ignorance or people who want to start an argument, say peace and walk away, right? But unpacking uh, ideas and concepts is something that our young people need to learn, because that's a way to have an intelligent conversation, because relationship first starts with communication, right? How do you communicate to people? So when I open my conversation, I always say salam alaikum, but then I unpack it for people and I said, do you know that you and I have now entered a contract? And they just look at me like, what? And I said, well, peace, salam, is one of the attributes of Allah, which means that I will make sure that you are complete, that you are not wanting, that you are at peace. And I said, and when you return the greeting and say, wa alaikum, or on you too be peace, we have entered a contract. And the contract is to have peace, right? But the other thing that I unpack, and in relationship, it works very well, is when you're able to explain yourself. And one thing that for everyone to know is how I unpack conflict. By the grace of Allah, because these are not my words, this is from the Prophet and Allah's. Islam defines peace not as a mantra. You can't get peace with a mantra. Peace, peace, brother, peace. The hippie days are over. Okay. So what does Islam say? In order to have peace, you must have justice. And in order to have justice, you must strive against oppression and persecution. That's the formula. So when Muslims say, oh, Islam is against violence, Islam is peace, one of the reporters asked me many years ago, he said, Shahina, this is the response we get from Muslims. But what does that mean? If there is so much conflict, why is Islam peace? So I had to unpack for him and myself that the idea of the concept of peace in Islam is a verb. It's something we have to do, which is strive to remove oppression and persecution for humanity, and through that we will have justice. Because if as long as there is persecution, there is no justice, and as long as there is no justice, there is no peace. Right? This is a formula that you need to internalize, and this will be the starting point of your relationship building, because then you will look at your own internal biases, because we all have biases. When I stood in the mosque the first time, and I had a black sister on my right and a Shia sister on my left and a white sister in the back, and something was uncomfortable here, because racism, there's no word in my language for that, right? And so I'm going, what is this? We are all Muslims. Why am I feeling this discomfort, right? Because some were praying a bit differently. So if we cannot address the biases we have within our own community, Idris, there's no way that we can address the biases that we have for people out there. So start with yourself, build your character, build your strengths, acknowledge your weaknesses, and then reach out. Start reaching out to people, to communities, volunteer. I have volunteered so many places, and I continue to do it, because that's the best learning that you can have, is when you volunteer in not just your community, but anywhere there is need for a volunteer.
Thank you. Leah, I think you'd like to add to that?
I mean, of course, Auntie Shahina, I mean, she always has the words, so much wisdom. Maybe just on another, so I mean, particularly with indigenous peoples on these lands. So I've spent many years kind of trying to build relationships and break down barriers, particularly between indigenous peoples, and diverse populations, and certainly in the riding of Winnipeg Centre, we're a beautifully diverse community. So I used to tell my students when, you know, I taught at university for many years. I used to say, you know, when you see somebody, and sometimes you see things, you know, remember that we all come from a mother. And we know that for every person on the earth, there's somebody that loves them unconditionally. And if you ever have the opportunity, I bet they have a really good story to tell about why they are the way they are today. And I just feel in my own relationships, I really listen to people's stories. Not just here, but I try and listen to stories like this from my heart to my head without thought. Because having relationships is an emotional experience. And it requires listening and learning. You know, I have a lot to learn. You know, I don't come here with advice really. You know, you know, I'm a visitor in the community this evening. I feel very honored to be invited as a visitor in the community. So I'm just here trying to form a relationship by listening to story, with my heart and my mind, and then be a good friend by responding with action, to do my part in the relationship. So, yeah, I mean, we have a lot of work in terms of Winnipeg. Um, I think there's so many things we could build together as like communities. Like I would love to, it probably won't happen before the next election because I think we'll be in an election in September. But I would love to build a recreation center for youth, Indigenous and newcomer youth. We have diverse communities, mainly come to Winnipeg Centre as the first stop. I think that would be a wonderful place to have, to form relationship. That's also requires space, and I think that's something that I know with things that we've gotten off the ground since I've been elected. It's really not about me. It's about the community coming together, different organizations, different groups of people, and working together to push something forward. And I really do feel like we need that space. We have Central Park. It needs development. It needs resources. You know, I know there's discussions on and off about Portage Place. I think we need space so that we can really have those relationships in a really good way, in a kind way.
Yeah, thank you both. And I think when we build relationships here, we also build community. And when we build community, then we are able to help our relatives across the globe a lot better. And I would like, I know there are some more questions, but I think I really would like to end this on with these very inspiring words from you both. And so I want to thank you both. Thank you, Shukran Migawich, for your wisdom, for I think helping us and definitely helping me because I'm become a bit too emotional about this issue, and sometimes it even clouds my own vision. By helping us kind of work through these issues, and hopefully people will take away the message that we've got to build relationships, build community. We've got to be engaged. We have to make sure our voice is heard. Pick up the phone, send an email. Leah's getting emails from us as we speak. So I'm sorry about that, but hopefully emails of gratitude. I hope as well. And I think humbled to also be in the presence of Shahina, who's is one of the giants who's kind of created, kind of paved a path for us to follow through. So thank you, everybody. The issue of Palestine is not going to be over today with the ceasefire. It's going to go on for many years, and the struggle for justice is like Mandela said, or like he titled his autobiography, "It's a long walk to freedom," right? So it's going to be a long walk to freedom, but the the bow of freedom eventually, or the bow of history eventually bends to justice. So hopefully we will get to see that as well. I'll also say this, that as a Palestinian in Canada, I don't think there's a lot of hurt, a lot of pain, but I don't think I've ever felt as hopeful, because what I've seen here of people mobilizing in, I think, in unprecedented numbers, and also because what I've seen in Palestine, in that Palestinians across their divides, we as a society have been segmented into West Bank, Gaza, Jerusalem, and Israeli Palestinians, and I think all of them have stood up with one voice, and I think that also gives me hope. And we have a duty to support them, to support Indigenous rights here in Canada, across the world, support Black Lives Matter, to support anybody who has an authentic, genuine call for justice, and that is, to me, is part of what it means to be a Muslim. So thank you, Sister Shaheena. Thank you, Sister Leah. It was a great honor to host you here tonight, and we hope to host you soon again, maybe on discussing something that's a little bit happier. But again, thank you for making time for this, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you everybody for joining us. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك, and with the prayer, سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Peace be upon you all. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.